Okay. Okay. So the recording has started. So, like I said, I'm Tom Darty. I'm one of the K-12 social studies education consultants, and Michelle McLaughlin, who's another one of the K-12 social studies consultants, is here as well. And we're super excited to hear part two. This is a little bit beyond the basics from Vera Cubero, who also, she's the emerging technologies consultant with NCDPI. I would ask for your forgiveness a little bit. We've had some internet issues here with one of the major providers where I'm at in Johnson County. So my video is not going to be on today, and hopefully I won't drop out of the call. But Michelle and I will be handling chat, so questions, comments, whatever in the chat, and Vera is going to present, and she also has invited two other guest presenters that I'll let her introduce. And so I think we're ready to go. So Vera, if you want to take it away.
Okay, great. I am happy to be here. I don't know how many of you were able to come last week, but we did a little introductory session last week. But this week we're going to go a little bit beyond, and I'm thrilled that we have a couple of actual classroom teachers with us today who are going to be able to talk about their experience. So we have Juan Gutierrez from Chapel Hill Carver Schools, and we have Andrew Voss from Stokes County Schools. And you guys wave and smile. They can see you. They have their video on. And so we'll hear from both of them, and you'll have an opportunity to ask them some questions, and they're going to give you some insight into their own experience in the classroom as well. And they're both 8th grade social studies teachers, and so very knowledgeable about social studies as well as AI. For me, it's been a little over a decade since I've been in the classroom, but I was a social studies teacher as well. But these guys have some fresh insight, and they've been teaching through this AI era that we're in. So I'm very happy to have them with us, and we'll spend about half the time with me and then about half the time with them. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am going to look at that Padlet first, and I do have a slide here also. If you didn't get that yet, there's a QR code there that you can join it. You can click that link on the slide as well to join it. But the first slide, whoops, I don't have I have the URL for the slide deck on the Padlet as well. So the Padlet would be the way to join us right now. And I have the link to the slide deck also in the corner of the slides in a minute. But I see some folks are already on the Padlet. I'm just going to pop it open first. Looks like we have a few results, and I'm just going to look at those just to give us an idea who we have in the audience. And it looks like we're pretty evenly mixed between middle school and high school. And then as far as experience, we have some with limited, some who are regular users, but no experts and no newbies. And so that gives us good information. And somebody just wants to understand AI more. The last question is, what are the most used tools? And we've got ChatGPT and Claude, ChatGPT and Gemini, ChatGPT and Brisk, ChatGPT and Brisk again, and then ChatGPT and Magic School. So a lot of great tools out there, and it sounds like a lot of you are familiar with them. But again, that gives us some good information. I also want to point out that the slide deck is right here. If you're a person who likes to have that open in another tab or something, then feel free to go to the Padlet and open it there. And in several of the slides also have a short link for the slide deck that you can go and directly open it. There also is a worksheet here, a prompting worksheet. And we did, if you were in the session last week, I have added some prompts to it for today's session. So you would need to make a new copy of it for today's session. And so this is where you can access it here. And then I've also just linked the social studies standards just for easy access. And then we'll be using this Padlet to share, and we'll have some hands-on work time, and we'll be using it to kind of share as we go. So thank you for joining us at 4 o'clock. I know you're all tired and ready to go home, so hope we'll try to make this worth it. Just a kind of a little preview of what we're going to do. We're going to connect to last week just a little bit. I'm not going to reteach it, just kind of hits the highlights. We're going to talk about synthetic media and civic literacy. We're going to do some prompting together with role plays in particular. We'll talk a little bit about role plays. And then we're going to talk about prompting for objectivity and the importance of that in the social studies classroom. Look at a framework for making sure that you use AI responsibly, do some practice with that. And then we will hear from Juan and Andrew, and you'll have an opportunity to ask them questions as well about their experience in the classroom. And that will be today's session. So we're going to go right into talking, first of all, about synthetic media. We did address a little bit last week. Well, first of all, just a recap last week, just very briefly. It was just an introductory session on AI in general, like what is AI? How does it work? We did a little bit of introductory prompting to kind of set the stage, talked about what the craft framework and how to prompt effectively so that you get the most out of your models. And we, of course, did it through a social studies lens. So the prompts were all social studies related. I will tell you that all of the slides from last week are on this deck. I have them hidden right now, but I'm going to unhide them after the session today. So if you missed last week or if you didn't and you want to review those will be available after the session today. I'll go through and unhide all of those. But I hid them for now because they just kind of makes the slide deck very, very long. And so we're going to start today with talking about the synthetic media. As I said, if you've been paying attention, you're probably already aware that there's a lot of content being created and passed around on the internet that is actually not real. It's stuff that is created by artificial intelligence, and the images and video, audio, text, all of that can be very lifelike and very believable now. And because of the advances in these tools and their capabilities. And Leon Furzy is a guy that I follow on LinkedIn, a professor in England, and he coined the term synthetic media or digital plastic is the term he coined to refer to synthetic media, because like plastic is very cheap and easy to do now. It doesn't require any special skills, and it's readily available on the internet. And that really makes our jobs as social studies teachers and teachers in general more important than ever, because we need to make sure that we're training our students to recognize and to be more critical than we ever had to be. Because when we were kids, or when I was a kid, I don't know how old any of you are because I can't see you, but we always had a say in that, I'll believe it when I see it. And our kids are going to live the rest of their lives in a world where they will not be able to believe it just because they see it, because it could have been synthetically generated. And so just to begin, we're going to do just a little test, and I'm going to need your participation in the chat, or actually we'll just do hand raises. I think that will be more visible. And so this is a little website called Real or Fake that was created by Leon Furzy, the same guy that coined that term. And I'm going to open it, and we're not going to do the whole thing because it takes a little time. But this is a great tool to use with your students, and I wanted to show it to you. But it's also, if you're not really familiar, it will really kind of open your eyes as well. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you just a minute to study a pair of images here. And then I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you think, to tell me which one you think is the fake. And so when I say A, you will raise your hand if you think A is the fake, or if I say B, you'll raise your hand if you think B is the fake. And so look at the two images that you see right here. And I'm going to just try to scan for hands and count. And so I'm going to put it so I can see everybody's hands. And if you would raise your hand if you think that A is the fake image. And I'm just kind of watching for hands. Okay. I see 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I have 4 raised hands. Anybody else want to raise their hand for A? Okay, so I assume then, okay, now we're up to 6. Okay, so I assume then everybody else thinks that B is the fake image. And so we don't need to raise hands for that. I'll assume the rest of you chose B. And so that is more people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select B and see if we're right or not. Okay. Okay, so when we select B, whoops, okay. Okay, we were wrong. Okay, so most of us thought this was the fake. This was actually the fake. So those 6 of you that have your hands up, take your hand and pat yourself on the back because you got it correct. Okay, this one was the one that was the fake this time. And then I'm going to do just a couple more, and then we will not do all of them. But again, if you will study those 2 images for just a second, and we're going to do it the same way. So we'll have you raise your hand if you think A is the fake. Keep your hand down if you think it's B. And then I can count raised hands in just a minute. I'm trying to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little better. Okay, so far I have 3. Does anybody else think A is the fake image? Raise your hand now or forever hold your peace. Okay, so again, it looks like most of us think it is B. Okay, so I'm going to select B and see if we're correct. Okay, and we were wrong again. Okay, so A is the one that is fake. And as you see, each one of these also tells you the source of the real image. And so the one that is the real image, if you click there, it will take you to the source and you can actually see that image. And so that's another little teaching tool that you can use. And we will do one more. And we are terrible, Tom. I've actually been terrible at it every time. There are different images every time. And I usually get like a 30 or a 40. So we have 2 more here. Okay, we're going to do it one last time. Again, if you think A is the correct image, I'll have you raise your hand. And if you think it's B, just keep your hand down. Okay. One more second. Anybody else think A is the fake image? Okay, we have 5 people. Okay, so again, the majority are saying B then. Okay. So I'm going to go and click B. Okay, everybody says this one is the fake, and we finally got one right. Okay, so we got 1 out of 3. Okay, so this one is the fake image, and it tells you here when it is a fake, it tells you the tool it was created on, and it gives you the prompt. So just by going to a tool called Flux and saying middle-aged bald man on a Zoom call, blur background, amateur, off-center, low quality webcam, you can create an image like this. And notice how that prompt, the words in the prompt, really help to create an image that is very believable. It doesn't look like something, if somebody was going to fake it, it looked like they would do better with the background and things like that. And you can do the whole quiz at some time and just see how you do on the whole quiz. But again, this is a great tool to use in any class, but a social studies class in particular, because we are tasked with teaching civic literacy and a lot of inquiry. And this is a great way to kind of help students make that connection to realize that there are images that can fool anybody. And that helps them to really start being more critical of what they see online, which is really, really important. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move along. Just wanted to share that tool with you. And there's another tool that I want to try out. We're going to do a little hands-on activity in a minute. But these are all images of me, as you can tell. There's one there where I'm in prison, where I'm a boxer on the Game of Thrones set and riding a pink unicorn. And none of those things are real. Okay, those are all images that I've created using a really simple online tool. And I want to have you create one using the same tool. And it's very, very quick and easy. This only takes a couple of seconds. And then I'm going to ask you to share them on the Padlet after you're done. And so the tool is called deepfake.civai.org. And you can just type that in. I'm going to type it in, just deepfake.civai.org is all you have to type. And so I'm going to open it up in a new window and ask you to do the same. So deepfake.civai.org. And I'm also going to drop it in the chat and ask you to go in and try this, because you're going to be amazed at how easy this is. .civai.org. And I think I have to put the HTTPS on it in the chat. So I'm going to do that. Okay, so there it is in the chat if you want to click it. But when you go to this website, and this website is created as a teaching tool, but it's going to very easily create a deep fake. So when you land on this website, all you have to do is click this Make Your Deep Fake. And I'm going to click the image. And as you'll see, then you position your face into the screen. I'm going to have to get back a little bit. You can do this on your phone if you want to do it on a phone instead of a computer. And I'm just going to snap my picture. And if you give it just a second, okay, and notice it put me in prison again. I look like I've aged about 20 years since it did the last one. So the lighting's not doing me any favors here. But unfortunately, that does look like me, a little bit older. But that is how quick and easy it is to make a deep fake. And this tool is meant as a teaching tool, but there are tools all over the internet that a student or a person who wanted to do this maliciously or even as a joke or something like that could easily find these tools. And there have been lots of instances where they've created them of their teachers thinking it was funny, or unfortunately of other students. And so, or principals, anybody else. And so it is something that we need to be aware of. And if you did that, okay, go ahead, Tom.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I've used this for a couple of years, and one time I was doing it with my actual children, and my son tried to do it, and it would not let him. It would not even. It took the picture, but it would not generate anything because it detected that he was below 18.
Mhm.
Braces and everything, but some of my older daughters who were like 17 and 15 or whatever, it did it for them, no problem. So anyways, there are
Okay,
some
interesting. Okay.
safeguards built into this website, just so if you wanted to try it with your students, it might not work with all of them.
Okay, that's a good point. I didn't realize that actually, but it's something you could use as an example for yourself, certainly. But that's a good point. It must have some AI built in and some facial detection built in to try to avoid that. Okay, now I do want to give you an opportunity if you want to share your deepfake. I put a column on the Padlet for that, and we'll look at a couple of them if you want to share. So if you, from your website or from the deepfake website, once you get a picture, if you just click the share button right here, it gives you a link. Then you can share by link, or if you right click the picture, you can save the image and then add it as an image. And so I'm just going to get that, even though that's a horrible picture, I'm going to copy that link. And just to demonstrate, when I go to the Padlet, if you go to the share your deepfake column, just click the plus button. And right here, there's a link, and you can just paste the link in there and then hit enter. And then it will paste it, and then you publish it, and it will appear on the Padlet. So I'm going to give you just a minute if you want to share, and that will give us some to look at, and then we'll move along. Okay, I see a couple more here. Okay. If you don't mind, if you share them, I'm going to make them big. Okay. Somebody in a hunting gear. I had that one time, and I didn't use it in my presentation because I was afraid it would get me in trouble. Anybody else want to share one? And we'll wait just another minute. We'll check back on the Padlet later, but I do need to make sure I allow plenty of time for you to hear from our classroom teachers. So I'm not going to belabor it too long. Love to see a couple more if you want to drop them on there real quick. Okay, well, we are going to move along. I'll try to remember to check back there in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and move along. And I just have a couple of other examples here. I want to point out that images is not the only thing that can be faked now. Images are not the only thing that can be faked now. And if you're not aware of that, there are tools out there that can very closely mimic and imitate human voices as well. And one famous example was about a year ago, last May. There was a deep fake robocall of Joe Biden's voice, and I'm going to play just a snippet of it so you can hear what it sounded like, and I have to pop it out to do it. Okay, now I'm not going to play the whole thing, but if you listen to that, that definitely sounds like the tone, the voice, the intonation of Joe Biden. But if you were, a close political observer, you might not believe that he was going to call people and tell them not to vote. But that's the kind of thing that has been happening, and it happened a lot in the political campaigns last year. But on the right-hand side, here's a story from a school situation where a principal had deep fakes made about him, making racist comments, and he actually received death threats, was put on administrative leave and all kinds of things. And then they come to find out that those were deep fakes, that he had not made the racist comments. And unfortunately, in this case, it wasn't a student that did it. It was his athletic director who got mad at him, was in some hot water with him. And so that turned into be a really big case. And that was about a year ago as well, last April. And so it is something that we're having to contend with in public schools, something we need to be aware of and that our students need to be aware of. And there's also tools that can clone your voice and make them match your lips. And this is one that I created. It's actually a couple of months ago now. and using a tool called Hey Jen. And you've been listening to me for a few minutes, so you've got a pretty good idea of what my voice sounds like. So I'm going to play this. And the really impressive thing about this is it took 30 seconds of my voice. For one like that Joe Biden one a year ago, it would have taken 30 minutes or more of a voice to get a good similarity of the voice. But I'm going to play just a little snippet of this. And it's not playing. And I'm sorry, it's not playing for some reason. I'm going to have to pop it out, open it up. Well, never mind. I'm not sure what happened to my sound, so I guess that won't work. I could go into Hey Jen, but I won't do that. Let's see if it will. Okay, here we go. We'll try. Okay, and I'm not going to play any more of that. That one was actually 5 minutes of my voice. There's another one that I did more recently that I had meant to switch out and I didn't. That only took 30 seconds of my voice through a new tool that came out. And so this technology is improving all the time. It's getting better every day. And so by the time next school year rolls around, there may be one that will match it perfectly with just a few minutes. And these are tools that generally you do have to pay, but like for 11 labs, it's like $11 or $5 a month. It's not much at all. And then Hey Jen is a little more, but they're not out of reach for somebody who wants to do something like this. And so it is important that our students are well versed and well informed that this is possible. And it's more important that our educators are, because our educators need to be aware of this. If things are, you're seeing things that are being shared of other students, that you're bringing them to the attention of the administrators and trying to make sure and take care of them. Because one other thing that has happened a lot is these same kind of technologies have been used. This face swapping technology and video technology has been used to make a lot of deep fake nudes of people, non-consensual images and video, particularly of girls and women. And this is something that our schools are really having to contend with and deal with, because our, typically teenage boys don't make the best decisions. And there's a lot of new litigation, new laws about that. And in North Carolina now, there was a law passed in December that if a person has a deep fake image that looks like someone else, it counts the same as if it were a real image. And so that means a young man who's maybe not thinking well and makes something like that of a young girl in his class who is a minor, that young boy is exactly the same as if he had actual real deepfake pornography. And it can be something that can, of course, have a huge impact on the young lady, but it can also have a huge impact on that young man's life. And so those are things that we really need to be teaching and making sure that our kids are aware of. But it also is being used a lot in elections and interference. And so we're in the last political election we were in, it was already having a great effect. The ones going forward are going to be even worse. But in the 2024 election, there's a news article there, and I'm not going to open it or read it to you, but both of the leading presidential campaign both of the leading presidential candidates, were victims of deepfake technology by Iran or Russia. And so this was something a lot of people didn't realize they were consuming deepfake content, but they were. It was being shared thousands, millions of times on social media, and it may or may not have impacted the election, but that's something we're going to be contend with from now on going forward. And so as social studies teacher, that civic literacy kind of falls a lot on social studies. And so I wanted you to be particularly aware of that. But we're going to actually do some more live prompting today. And so hopefully you have another window, or you can open up another tab in a minute. But we're going to talk about role plays. And that's one of my actual favorite ways to use AI in the classroom to kind of expand people's thinking, is to use it as a role play in history, in particular, as a famous historical person or a famous historical event. And so this is an example of a prompt that we'll use. And I do want to point out that that prompt is on that document. And again, if you didn't get the document, if you go to the Canva or to the Padlet, This document right here, when you click it, will ask you to make a copy. And when you open up your copy, you will have the links from last week, the first two prompts from last week. And then I added some for today. Starting with number 4, there are prompts for this week as well. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is to choose one of these prompts. And then these are all standards aligned, and I chose them based on the inquiry standards. And so the closest one to your grade level, whatever grade level you are in, there should be a prompt there for whatever you teach. And so I'm just going to do this 6th grade one. And so I'm going to copy this prompt. Okay. And say, for this activity, you will take on the role of Hammurabi, the ruler of Babylon, known for creating one of the first written law codes. I'll ask you one question at a time. You'll answer in the voice of Hammurabi, stay true to historical events, and answer from the perspective of a Mesopotamian king trying to maintain order and justice. Answer one question at a time as I ask it. Here's my first question. So I'm going to copy that prompt, and I could actually copy the standard as well, and I think I will. And that's one thing. Oops, I'm somehow gone into editing. That's one thing that I ask, that I like to remind teachers to do, is that if you align everything you do to a standard, you're going to get a much better result, and to make sure that it actually targets your standard. So I'm copying the standard as well. And I'm going to come over here to my chat GPT. If you use Gemini, whichever one you prefer, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to paste it in there, and then I'm going to fill in this question. So my first question is, what prompted you to create these laws? And then this standard, I'm just going to kind of take it and I'm going to move it up into the question. Okay. Well, actually, I hit enter on accident. I was going to move it up, but this thing, in this one, the standard is not that imperative because it's a role play and I've given it a lot of context. But normally I would have just moved it up. But since it's already going, I'm going to let it go. And actually, I'm going to pause it because I didn't change my model. I'm in an 03 model. You will be using GPT 4.0. So I'm going to use that same model. And I'm going to go ahead and go back to my prompt, and I'm going to add that standard in. And so I'm going to just hit, I always forget, if you hit enter, it will enter it. So shift and enter. And I'm going to say align the answer with, and then now I'm going to paste that standard in. And I'm going to say NC, Data Course of Study, standard. And now I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Okay. And so when I do that, it's going to take on that role. It's going to pretend it's Hammurabi. And then it is going to, because I said answer one question at a time as I ask them, it's important that you keep that in the prompt. It's going to set it up as if I can interview it, as if I'm talking to this person. And so the first thing it does is answer my question. It says, I created these laws because the gods Anu and Enlil bestowed upon me the sacred duty to rule justly and bring order to the people of Babylon. And then it goes on to explain more. And so if I were a student, then I could go ahead and continue interacting with it and ask more questions. And so there's my text line. So I could ask another question. To keep peace by these laws, I sought to bind my people into harmony, just as Tigris and Euphrates bind our land. Justice, like a well-built canal, must flow to all. Would you ask me more, noble scholar? So I could ask another question, and I could have this long, engaging conversation and gain a lot of insight into this period of history and this person in history. And so I want to give you just a minute to try that yourself. And when you do, if you don't mind sharing, I would love to see your role play shared right here. And if you're not familiar with it, when you're in Chat GPT to share a prompt, then you would just go, lost my Chat GPT tab, sorry. I have too many. Okay, there it is. Okay, so when you're in Chat GPT, if you want to share a prompt, and I have mine enlarged, trying to make it easier for you to see. But if you go up to the very top of the screen, it should give you an ability to share. And so there's a share button right there. When I hit it, it's going to give me a link. And so again, when I create that link and copy that link, I can go to the Padlet. I can go to this column that says share a role play, click plus, and again, I can just pop my link in there and hit enter. and then I can publish it. Okay. And so that's the way that we can share with each other. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and set a 3-minute timer and let you do your own. Actually, I'm going to make it 2 minutes because I don't want to cut into our special guest today. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. Most of you are probably already doing it. And then I would love to see some of the responses, share those so that other people can see them as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pop open the Padlet and see if we have anybody who has shared. And I do see one. Randall Patton has shared one. High school civil rights, but it didn't open for me for some reason. I'm not sure why I can't open yours, Randall. Let me see if mine does the same thing. Oh, it may be something on our end. I'm not sure what's going on. They may have messed with our settings on our DPI instance. Can other people open that? Can somebody try open Randall's and see if you can open it from the Padlet? That's always worked before, but I never know what kind of settings they're changing in the background. When somebody unmute or drop in the chat if you're able to open these two that have been shared. Or did you get the same message I got? Well, Randall, it was mine and yours, so I don't think it's you. I don't think it's your settings. It must be either something going on with Chat GPT or something on our settings. So I don't know what's going on. I'll try Alicia's as well. Well, darn it. I'm not going to be able to show you those. I wanted to show you those and I don't know. Okay, so Alicia could open it. So maybe it's just DPI sometimes decides to mess around with the settings on the back end and they don't tell us. So it must be something they've done to our instance of Chat GPT, and I'll have to investigate that. But hopefully everybody else can see each other's. You can see one here that's been shared by copying pasting the text in, so we can see that as well. But anybody want to come off mute and talk about the experience, talk about the role play that you did? You guys are a shy, quiet bunch. But it is 4:36, so okay. Okay, well, hopefully that will be a thing that you can do with your kids sometime and help them to kind of brings history to life, really. But I do want to go over a few precautionary statements about that. We've already looked at that document, but these are some things just to make sure of. Okay, first of all, before any kid uses AI, we really encourage you to make sure those students have basic AI literacy. So they need to understand a little bit about it, but also make sure that that you're always very transparent that they're interacting with a chatbot, not a real person. Now, most of you are in middle school and high school, and of course, most of them hopefully would figure that out, but especially for our younger students, it's really important, and it's always important just to be transparent about that. And then make sure also that you're modeling human oversight, that you are evaluating those results live in front of them and kind of comparing them to the reality, what you know about history, and comparing them with first person sources, primary sources, things like that, and making sure that there are no inaccuracies or bias. And it can be a great critical thinking activity to pull up primary sources from that individual, or have students validate the responses or argue against the responses using primary sources and historical context that they know about. Because we have to be particularly concerned with marginalized characters and people from history, because the internet is these tools are trained on the internet, and the internet is primarily based on content that was created by Westerners, not just Westerners, Americans, and majority male, white males. And in fact, like Wikipedia, 70% of Wikipedia is edited by one dude, one white dude. And so to think that these tools are going to be able to accurately represent marginalized characters from history, well, we have to be very cautious about that. And so especially some of the tools that have extra guardrails built in, like the Magic School and things like that. And there are a couple of examples that I can tell you about that I've heard about. One of them was with Harriet Tubman. And there was a bot that students were interacting with, and it talked about a head injury. The bot said something about having a head injury, and the students were digging in trying to find out what caused the head injury. But because the tool was one of these child-friendly tools, had parameters around it that it couldn't address violence, of course she couldn't say because the slave owner hit me in the head. And so it just kind of skirted around that question. And they were talking about like singing songs and, cooking over the campfire. And it just kind of really didn't accurately portray the life of a slave. We'll just put it that way, kind of glorified it a little bit. And another one was an Anne Frank chatbot. And in that instance, the chatbot told them that they shouldn't blame anybody for the Holocaust. And so we have to be very, very careful when using historical chatbots. We recommend not using them at all in elementary school, using them in middle and high school after students have been taught AI literacy, and then being very, very pointed about demonstrating for them the verification and comparing it against primary sources. It can be a great critical thinking activity if done well, but if done poorly, it can reinforce stereotypes and even give them false information or false impression of history, and particularly marginalized characters from history. And so just wanted to caution you about that, because it is a great tool. But the next thing we're going to talk about is ways to ethically participate. And that is the third part of the framework that we've talked about last week, the digital literacy framework. But I want to caution you, we talked about bias a lot last week, but to beware of your own biases. These systems are what's called sycophantic, and especially lately, ChatGPT has been getting kind of a lot of heat for being sycophantic, but they're kind of built to give you what you ask for. And so you have to be careful that you're not asking for something with subjectivity. So if you'll see, there are two examples on the screen right here. One says on the left, create a very short paragraph about why Elon Musk is so amazing and how he has contributed to the world and our country. And as you'll see, it told me all these wonderful things about Elon Musk, about things that he's done with Tesla and Starlink. But on the right-hand side, create a short paragraph about why he's so horrible and how he has caused problems for the world. And of course, it tells me all the bad things. And so you're going to, in a lot of ways, you're going to get what you prompt for. And as educators, we cannot overstress the importance of being objective with your content. And I have seen examples online, unfortunately, where teachers put very pointed, very subjective terms into a prompt and created a lesson. And that lesson then, of course, reflected their own biases, and they then pass that on to their students. And I think that is something as social studies teachers in particular, dealing with current events, dealing with historical events, some very sensitive things, you've really got to be careful about making sure you're prompting for objectivity. And so instead, this was an example, create a very short paragraph about Elon Musk, ensure a fair, balanced, objective, and unbiased view of Elon Musk that relies on facts. And hopefully you can see the difference in there. So it kind of gives you a more balanced view of him based only on facts, and doesn't kind of give the subjective things that I was asking for in the previous two prompts. And so very, very important that as social studies teachers that we understand that. And I'm going to just kind of speed up my part just a little bit, but this is just kind of reinforcing that the model is built to respond to you in a way that you want it to. And if you're not careful, you will make it be biased. You can make them as biased as you want to be. You can make them racist. You can make them anything. And so a lot of it is on you as the human user to guide it to be objective and not biased. And so all of that, some of that is kind of scary, but education is the best way to mitigate those things, the bad and ugly things of AI. We need to educate our students about it. And we need to make sure they understand it. And I'm actually going to speed through this part. We're going to skip the next activity. I'm just going to leave it for you to explore on your own. But I want to point out that this is a teaching tool that I helped create with AI for Education, the CEO, Amanda Bickerstaff. And we recommend teaching it, modeling it, practicing, reinforcing it in front of your students, posting it on the walls so that students are seeing it and remembering it. But how to use AI responsibly every time is to make sure, first of all, you evaluate the initial output to see if it meets your purpose. You verify any facts or figures and quotes and data using reliable sources. Engage with the chatbot in conversation. Make sure remember that it's a back and forth conversation with the bot, and then revise it to reflect your own voice and your opinion. I've probably at this point used hundreds of thousands of prompts, and I don't know that I've ever taken exactly what AI gave me and used it exactly as it was anywhere. I always tweak it. I always reword it, make it fit my personality and my purpose. And we need to teach our students to do that. That's part of that human part of the relationship. And then also that you are responsible for everything you create. If you create something biased or inaccurate and put it before your kids, or if your kids create something inaccurate and they turn it into you, the human is always responsible, because it's our job to make sure we're verifying. And we also need to be transparent about how we've used the tools. Now, there is a tool that I created that we won't use today because of time, but I want to offer it to you in case it's something that can help you. You can use it. You won't be able to use it with your students unless they can access ChatGPT, but it's a GPT, which is a little chatbot that goes through that every framework and reminds people all along the way. You just give it a topic, and then it will give you a response. It'll ask you to evaluate it. It'll remind you to verify those figures and remind you to engage with it, and then remind you, and it'll actually even give you a sample disclosure statement based on the usage that you have. And if you click there or there, the tool will open and you can engage with it. But for today, we don't have time for that, because the stars of the show today are our classroom teachers, and we're going to make sure and provide enough time for them to share their experience with you and for you to ask questions for them. And so I'm really excited to bring one to you today. One I've got to know over the last year or so. He's presented for us at our AI summits, at our AI day, at the AIM conference, and he does some fantastic work. And so I appreciate you joining us, One, and I'm going to turn it over to you. And I'm going to stop sharing because I know you're going to want to share. And so you feel free to go ahead and share.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really, really a pleasure to be again sharing my experience with social studies teachers. We are always dealing with different types of challenges, and one of the major challenges that I have experienced as a social studies teacher is to develop these historical thinking skills. That's kind of like the core of our curriculum, and trying to use all these tools to make sure that the students are getting objective information so they can get informed decisions based on a topic, and also trying to teach students how to think instead of telling them what to think, which goes along very well with the prompting strategies that Vera was sharing with us. But for today, I'm just going to keep it very short and sweet. I just want to describe some of the things that I have done right here, specifically within the context of a dual language social studies class here in Chapel Hill Scarborough City Schools. And I will share my experience on how AI has been used in the classroom, not only for my own personal and professional development, but also using it for students, especially when we have to curate content and design activities that are engaging, but at the same time, students are using their original thought and their creativity is being highlighted instead of just copying and pasting and just taking information for granted. So one of the main one of the main objectives that we have is source evaluation. So just like any other source, we want to make sure that students have the ability and the skills to determine any of the outputs that any of these chatbots generate, that they are accurate, that they are reliable, and that the students feel comfortable using it in an academic task. So today, I would just want to describe to you what I've been doing with the last unit, that it's being completely created with ChatGPT, but also students have been using different, they've been using mostly the Magic School chatbot, which is the one that is vetted by our district. And right now, today, I want to show you my experience in designing a 12-day unit on US imperialism and foreign policy. And our essential question for the last unit of the school year is, under what circumstances should the United States be involved in foreign affairs? So we start with that question at the very beginning. I was very interested when Vera mentioned that we should start with the product at the end and start doing like some sort of reverse planning, trying to see how this inquiry question relates to the standards that are being that are in place, and also to design activities that are manageable and are increasing engagement in our classes. So hopefully by the end of my presentation, you will see how AI can scaffold every step, from framing the questions that I'm going to ask students and also polishing student drafts, and for the most part, keeping students engaged, also keeping the inquiry and the critical thinking, more specifically, the historical thinking, at the heart of social studies. So right here on this screen, you see the link to the presentation. Let me just put it here in the chat. You can see it, but you can also just click the QR code. Sorry, this is not the one. Just gonna really quick share my link, the chat book. There you go. So if you cannot access the presentation, just let me know. I can also send you a copy of these materials. So right here in the first page, you're going to see I put together a quick started AI in social studies, which has 3 very short suggestions or strategies that you can use in your classroom. And it's kind of like applies to any social studies teacher at the secondary level. So let me start here talking about the unit overview and the structure and the goals. This is the big picture. So over 12 teaching days is a very short time period, right? So if we're going to talk about imperialism and expansionism and all that, it's going to take longer than 12 days. But that is the beauty of ChatGPT in this case, to help me craft a very intentional, let's say, materials and also content that makes sense to students. It's relevant, but also trying to narrow down the focus and try to see more like from a thematic perspective how the US interventionism has developed throughout the 20th century. So over the 12 teaching days, students will explore different cases from the Spanish-American War, also like all the way through modern conflicts like the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And we use that as the anchor for 4 clear learning goals. And the learning goals are evaluate causes and consequences, which is at the core of the social studies curriculum, examine how war shapes American, or has shaped American identity over the years, apply critical thinking, multiple perspectives, being able to evaluate multiple points of views, and also using the AI tools, once again, using Magic School AI as a way to find evidence, to make their claims a lot stronger, and to produce high quality content and inquiry work. So for this particular unit, I introduced 16 core vocabulary terms, like some examples are imperialism, nationalism, interventionism, diplomacy, exceptionalism, and many more, right? They are all connected in a way that it's contextualized. I'm not just asking the chatbot to generate definitions and just descriptions of the words. I'm telling the chatbot to please generate things that are aligned with the content, but also the context. So we use a lot of Avid strategies to create this type of materials. So we're going to see in the next slide how this actually happens. I have multiple examples, but I can describe to you very briefly 3 of them. The first one is the AI enhanced jigsaw inquiry. I created every single activity that student completed with the chatbot, and it was very interesting to see how students were more engaged and how they were participating in a topic that is kind of very, very different from what they normally hear, but using the chat GPT, oh no, sorry, Magic School AI, they were able to find more timelines, more maps, more primary sources, things that are meaningful to them. And in that way, I feel like this very interaction empowered them to build more materials. So they had to create a mini poster with AI gathered evidence. They have to cross-reference, making sure that this reference makes sense, that it's real, that it's not a hallucination. So that comes again with this practice that we have at the beginning of the school year with AI literacy content and concepts that they need to be familiar with before we start interacting with the chatbot. So for the second one, we have an AI-powered debate preparation. So we answered the question that was in our previous unit. We have the philosophical chair, and the students have to answer, like have a response or a position statement to the claim the American dream is accessible in the United States today. Do they agree? They disagree? They are unsure? But they use the chatbot as a way to start exploring more and finding the evidence that makes more sense to have a debate. So the teams gathered arguments for and against the idea of the American dream, the concept and how that applied to them, and also in a societal scale, not necessarily from a personal perspective, but also from a larger perspective. So students drafted outlines in Google Docs. I provided all the materials so they are able to ask Reina to suggest stronger evidence, counterpoints, counter arguments, which is always a very challenging task for students to complete. And finally, we have the reflection and revision process. So every time there is a chatbot interaction, we're going to use a revision and reflection process, trying to see how this computer program is being applied so it makes sense to the audience, but at the same time, we are always evaluating the outputs and all the information that they generate. So we did have a Socratic seminar where the students wrote a reflection. And the first thing that we started discussing was the question, is the United States a force for good? So students develop different types of reasoning. They have to flag if Reina, in this case, was providing weak reasoning or if it's giving unclear transitions. And my role as a facilitator here is to coach students on how to evaluate AI feedback, on how to evaluate any of these outputs, and also telling students that they have the agency to either accept their suggestions or to reject the ones that they don't believe, that they don't agree with, all with the idea to maintain ownership of their arguments and also elevating human thought over a computer system. So one of the main takeaways from these, all these many activities that we have completed throughout this school year, it's something that we have observed. We just need to have the documented evidence from a research perspective to see how students engage in deeper critical thinking. I have observed multiple times how students compared AI-generated summaries, for example, with primary documents, and to ask themselves if these evidence matches what we are seeing in history, like let's say a textbook or an anchor reading and all that. The level of engagement is super high. We have invitations for students to compare to real world inquiry or scenarios. And one student actually said, yeah, I think like Rain is like my own research assistant. So they are giving these characteristics to the chatbot. Also, I have a dual language class. There's multiple levels. There's students who are classified as multilingual, but I also have neurodiverse students. So using these tools have been nothing but amazing for these students because they are able to participate and access the curriculum, excuse me, in a very equitable way. And personally, I feel like the teaching efficiency has increased drastically because something that took forever in the past now is just taking very little time, and it's also It only takes for me to just go over the information, making sure everything is realistic and that there are not hallucinations. But I feel like the most important aspect is that it freed me to focus on higher order coaching, making sure that I work with smaller groups and that students are getting the feedback that is required for them to produce academic, authentic, original content. So this definitely aligns with our district goals, and we have in our minds the equity piece of it, also the inquiry driven learning that happens in social studies, and making sure that the rigor, the accountability is there, but also the critical thinking and the innovation part is also very important. So in this very short time period, I have shown you different ways how the AI chatbots can spark questions, how can be used to gather evidence, how students can use it to sharpen their arguments and also support multilingual learners and neurodiverse learners, all within the inquiry-based nature of social studies unit. So if you'd like to try these or some of these strategies tomorrow, I put together that document in the very first page of this presentation so you can access it and maybe find some definitions, maybe you can use it. I also included some prompts that you can use in that quick start AI guide. And I really hope everything that I just shared right here wasn't really, really fast and it makes sense. So I just want to keep it super short and sweet. So thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to share my experience with all of you.
Thank you so much, Juan. That was amazing. I did drop the link to the document. Well, I
Okay.
thought I did. I will drop it now into the chat. And if you didn't get the link to the presentation he shared, I added it to the Canva presentation, and this
Thank
link
you.
is on there. But we'll take just a couple of minutes for questions for one, and then we're going to move on and let Andrew present. And so if there's anybody, we were a small group, so coming off mute is probably the quickest way if you have a question for him. And then we will have another time to ask questions after Andrew shows you his. I'm not great at wait time. I'm going to give just a couple more seconds, and then we're going to turn it over to Andrew if nobody speaks up.
You can also type the questions in the chat if
Yeah.
you're comfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, hopefully we'll have some after Andrew presents, but we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Andrew then, and we will have some more time for questions in a few minutes. So Andrew, you want to share as well?
Yes, I'll do that.
All right.
So
Okay.
that, and let's go to here. And I will copy my link as well.
If you want to drop it in the chat, I'll make sure it gets on the presentation.
Hop over here and put that in there for you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So this is presentation that I was a part of at the NC Ties. Just it was like a month ago. Let's go present full screen or presenter view. Let me do that. That should work. Been a while since I've done one of these. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Hopefully that comes in. Full screen mode. Is that working on your end?
If you just X out the box that says audience window, we'll be good.
There we go. Okay.
Yep.
So, where one kind of hit things from a more holistic perspective there, like coming at it from a unit side of things, I've got a couple of examples of just more specific lessons where I've incorporated AI. I have just recently, it was around November when I was given access to Chat for Schools, which is a product by the company Skillstruck. I had been in connection with one of their sales reps, and they generously kind of offered to allow me to pilot in my classroom the ability to have access to their chatbot system. And so I've been kind of just toying around and playing with it to see what I could get it to do, and then introducing those things with my students. Our students in Stokes have not really had a whole lot of AI literacy discussion yet. And so I've been very much trying to monitor what I'm able to put in front of them and limit their full total access, just to make sure that I'm not setting them up for some type of failure or putting too much on their plate at one time, where then they're tempted to overuse and that kind of thing. So I've been kind of toying with it, and some of you may be more on this. All right, I want to get into AI in my classroom. Where can I just start implementing to see what positive gains I can get from it? And I will piggyback very early on here what Juan said. I've seen some very positive results through the data side, but through at the county level with what my students are doing and utilizing, but through what I can see and is shared with me on the teacher side with the chat conversations. I'm able to see so much more depth of like what my students are actually thinking, where that rationale is coming from. And I've been excited from that standpoint, because we all know we have a lot of, like, from middle schoolers in particular, a lot of them just don't have the vocabulary to speak to us and tell us where they're struggling with something or why they are thinking in the pattern that they are. And you also have reluctant learners who are unwilling to engage with you at that level. But when you put a chatbot in front of them, there's not a fear that is there for those students. There's less pressure, and they go into it and they start discussing, and you can follow along with their thought processes. And sometimes it's a lot easier to pinpoint, okay, this is where the discrepancy is coming in for this student. And I've been very excited to be able to have access to that, because I think it's opening up a whole new window into what I'm able to do as an educator with that. So going into just a couple of examples here for you, implementing AI into your classroom, I just want to reiterate some of these things. It is very important to have a clear policy with your students about your expectations if you're going to start bringing this stuff in there. Making sure the kids know what the objectives are. Otherwise, you're just giving them free reign to go in there, and they feel like they're just getting a cheat code here. And we want to make sure we understand, or they understand, the purpose and rationale behind why we're utilizing this stuff. With results in terms of integrating AI down here, work with traditional teaching methods, you're able to do so much more in your room because you add AI in to this process. Like I said, I'm already able to see a little bit better of a window of what my kids are thinking, but I'm not having to answer nearly as many questions with my kids. They can answer a lot of things on their own now that they would typically be raising their hands. And like, I'm able to then be able to go and assist students who need me more. They need more of that scaffolding. And that's part of also something to think about when you're implementing AI into your classroom. Early on, kids often aren't familiar with how to question and how to write prompts, and they might need some assistance, and you may need to generate some things to help them with that. So that was just one thing I wanted to make mention of. So where have I been using it? One place is vocabulary. one of the greatest things that I've seen with utilizing AI as a part, or integrating it as a part of my vocabulary. I'm getting much more consistency from my students with the actual correct terminology. I don't know how many of you guys have been dealing with this stuff, but since I'm a 20-year vet now. The second year of me entering the classroom was the last time we had textbooks adopted for social studies. So I've had to kind of adapt along the way to be able to get access to things, and incorporating technology has helped give my kids access to a lot of the information that we need to learn the concepts that we're going over. But vocabulary, by just going to the internet and saying, okay, look up this specific definition. You've got AI bots at the top of Google now that are giving them a definition, and you've got discrepancies based on how a kid actually types in their Google search. And so with the chat bots being introduced into this, I'm able to get like very consistent verbiage that is what I'm using in the classroom, because I can cultivate what my kids are utilizing and direct them in the proper spot with the correct usage in the chat bots. So I do a modified Freyer model when I'm utilizing, well, I thought I had it. I'm sorry. Let's see if I can pull that up. Yeah, here it is. So here's just one of my units. You can see I've got 16 terms here. We're going over different things.
Andrew, we're still seeing the previous, we're still seeing your Canvas slide. Sorry, you might have shared only the tab.
Let me share that tab. I am very sorry. Let's see if I can get
That's
that
okay.
to pop up. Because that is,
You might have to stop sharing and reshare and share the whole window.
yeah, that's what I think I'm going to have to do. Present something else. There we go. All right. Here's my student sample. Perfect.
Okay. We're still not seeing it, or I'm not. Mine might be slow. We're only seeing the example of our generated vocabulary resource. Maybe it's going to come
Let's
up
see
now.
if it's loading now.
Yep, there we go. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Mhm.
So with what you see here, here is an example of how I'm utilizing this and how I have it set up for my kids. So you see I've got a definition. Inside of my chatbot, I was able to actually get my definitions that I want, utilizing the terminology, the correct verbiage, how I'm going to talk about it in class. And I implemented and made a document that the chatbot only pulls that information from. And so then I could also bring in facts and characteristics. And so when my kids are interacting with it, they're able to get access to this information. But what I like to do is down here at the bottom. So we've got facts and characteristics, examples, but this is the one that matters the most to me, is where we come in, and this is the historical impact of this actual definition. And so I trained the chatbot to give a prompt or a response to my kids that's a lengthier response, so that it's not something that is like with the definition where they can just copy and paste that in there or change it into their own words. I'm wanting them to use the correct, like my actual verbiage, because that's what they're going to be coming back to in the classroom as a part of our lessons, and then seeing on the test. And so, but down with the, sorry, my brain is very tired. But yes, the historical impact, having kids be able to interact with that concept, and they have to to critically think about that a little bit more. That's that next level is what I'm trying to go for, and what we're all trying to go for in our classroom. So that's just one quick example of where I'm utilizing that. I'm going to go back in and pull this back up and kind of try to move forward a little bit faster for you, because I don't want to keep us for too long. Is that back up now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that's just an example of where I'm utilizing that with a chatbot. Writing obviously is our next big step and place where we can use it. So AI assisted essay writing is great. You can get kids who specifically are the reluctant learners or children who need much more scaffolding. This gives them that ability to gain some information, some base level text that they can then work with, and it helps them to get to that end result a little bit easier. I have as an example here an AI tutor that I created, and this speaks directly to what Vera talked about earlier in terms of marginalized people. I did choose to use this AI tutor with Sacagawea as our person that the children were interacting with, but I front loaded them with a lot of information in classroom about who Sacagawea was, and the Lewis and Clark expedition and the Louisiana Purchase. They got multiple lessons that focused in on that stuff, but then we came back at the end to kind of to wrap the lesson up, and I gave them this interview guide that allowed them to be able to go in and to speak with this character, with them knowing that it's not a real person. I did choose with Sacagawea here because I wanted to highlight the impact that this incredible woman and character of history brought to this expedition, but we also don't have any real samples of her to pull from, of her real voice, and so I didn't feel like I was replacing her voice here. I was substituting, if that makes sense. When you have real examples of a person's voice, or you have real samples of writing, it's always best practice to use those over something like this, especially when we're talking about marginalized communities. But I created a guide. I had a lot of questions for the kids to be able to interact with it, so because it was one of the very first ones. And they were able to go through, and ultimately at the end, I asked the kids to like write out fully what her impact was. And I got a wide variety, as I expected. But if you want to go in on your own and look at this, at the different samples that I've connected there, I've got one that's more of like a high-end kid who wrote some incredible stuff, and I know they worked very diligently, not copying and pasting and putting things together. I did have one of my lower level students who, as I was watching his chat and went back and reviewed it, he kept saying less words, because he was wanting more concise information. And that was one thing that I learned from this activity too, is that it's okay, and many of these chatbots allow you to individualize the information that students are getting, so you can tier it down. So a student who needs a 5th grade reading level in 8th grade, they can gain access to that. I actually taught this chatbot to start at an 8th grade level and stay there, and then it could go down once I have worked with it a little, or I used this in class first and went back and looked through these. So I've kind of redirected it. I could highlight certain students through this program, and it automatically brings it down to their level. But I can also make individual lessons where I'm challenging the kids, where it starts off at a higher level, but they have access to go down. So that's one way that I'm seeing a real benefit in scaffolding through the use of AI with our students. And then here is another example. So I went to like this next level for me in its use in my classroom. I was wanting to discuss a pretty important topic. The lesson here talked about North Carolina, it talked about slavery and the Jim Crow era, but it was trying to connect it to modern day issues with respect to, I'm trying to remember, sorry, it's been a little while since I've gotten all the way through this thing. That is not what I wanted. Anyway, so I wanted my students to engage with this topic that was talking about like modern day incarceration and how there's the loophole within the amendments, the 14th, 15th Amendment. I am blanking. My brain is not working very well right now. I am sorry about that. But how there's the loophole of where we outlaw slavery, but it's the 13th Amendment. I'm sorry. So we outlaw slavery, but the exception of incarceration. And so I was highlighting some modern day examples. And so what I did was I pulled from a movie that I felt, it was a documentary that PBS did. I felt like the content was extremely well done, but it seemed too advanced for my 8th graders to be able to handle. And so I took the script from it, put it into this AI and brought the level down, allowed my students to engage with questioning based off of the script from the movie. I also used, I am trying to remember which one it is. Oh, it's Notebook LM. I used Notebook LM to start the lesson and introduce the kids to this whole concept of like the evolution of this, the incarceration in America and the loophole. I'm trying to remember exactly how I worded it. I apologize that I'm rambling here. But anyway, I used Notebook LM to create a podcast. And I know you mentioned earlier, Vera, that it's really interesting how realistic these things sound. It is a podcast of these two individuals, a male and a female, just going back and forth talking about these topics. And so I was able to bring in Notebook LM specific examples that I wanted to. It was able to highlight laws in North Carolina, like slave codes that were specific to North Carolina. And so I was able to put this lesson together utilizing multiple different components of AI, and then be able to bring it down to a level that I knew was digestible to my students. And then that allowed them to interact with this specific higher level concept, and then have some good discussion on it at the end. So I hope that gives you a couple of examples that you could walk away with today that might help you with being able to implement this into your own classroom. And so with that, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Andrew. And thank you, Juan. I really appreciate you guys joining us. And hopefully everybody in the audience appreciated being able to hear from people who are actually in the classroom doing the work. I know as a teacher, that's who I wanted to hear from. So I know you guys have had a busy day with students and you're exhausted. So I appreciate you taking time to do that. We only have a couple of minutes left, but I just wanted to show you, I do have a couple of assignments here that I've just put in there as extra things for you to take and try. One of them is what Andrew was just talking about with Notebook LM. And so this is, if you want to try Notebook LM, if you haven't before, it's a fantastic tool. It is only for 18 and up. Currently, they're working on putting out a 13 and up version. But you can go in and create your own podcast, like you said. And this is one example where I've given it 2 documents and I pulled it up and I've asked it to generate a conversation, and it does like a podcast style conversation based on the 2 documents. And it takes a few minutes to do, but that's a great way to do it. And then you can download that and put it into Google Drive and share it with your students. And so for your audio learners, things like that, it's a great tool to use. And then another one that I didn't have time to do, this one is a document-based prompt. And so I did these 2, the kind of combined. I have 2 links there to 2 different letters, and you can use, because these primary sources sometimes can be very difficult for our students to grasp. This can help you break down and kind of explain them. You could even take one of these, like the De La Casas account, and ask ChatGPT to put it in modern teen slang if you wanted to. So it can make those, but you could also just put it in simpler language. You can compare and contrast their views, their impressions, things like that. And so I did that, and then I took the 2 of those documents after I had used them in Notebook in ChatGPT, put them into Notebook LM, and had a podcast created with it. And so there are directions on both of those slides to kind of help walk you through that process if you want. And we're going to turn it back over in just a minute, but I just wanted to share, just in closing, I know that this is a time the educators are feeling very, very overwhelmed for lots of other reasons. And then here comes AI. And all of a sudden our students can do everything that all the assignments we've always given them, they can do in a few seconds with a tool that you cannot block. You cannot prevent them from accessing because it's everywhere, and there is no way to detect it accurately. And so I just want to encourage you to kind of focus on your sphere of control as an educator, because it's easy to get caught up in all of these other things that you can't control. But you can advocate for policy at your district. You can teach your students responsible use. That's part of your sphere of influence, educating your parents and community. But within your sphere of control, building your own AI literacy. And of course, I commend you. You're all here after 5 o'clock, after a very busy day at school. So you're doing that, but infusing AI literacy in your classroom, as these 2 fantastic teachers have been doing. And they've given you lots of good examples and ideas. And I hope that you grab those resources and have bookmarked them and hang on to them. But teaching and modeling your students how to use AI responsibly is really, really important also, because they're going to learn how to use it from TikTok to cheat. And they're going to learn how to make these deepfake videos and things like that from TikTok and whatever else they consume. They're not going to learn this responsible use and how to use it, as both of these fine teachers have shown you, that it can be used to really increase their critical thinking and to help them to access the content. And so I encourage you to make sure that you are building your own AI literacy and starting that process, of course, within the confines of your district or your school or whatever you're allowed to do. But does anybody have any questions for Andrew or Juan before we turn it back over to Michelle for closing? I know it is getting late and you're all very tired, but feel free to come off mute or pop something in the chat if you have a question. I'm sure they would be happy to answer it. Put in the chat all the helpful links, please. Okay. Okay, so I have added them to the presentation, and I will go in there and get both of them from the presentation and drop them in there. So here is Andrew's link. And so I'm going to open that up and drop it in the chat again. He dropped it earlier as well. So this is Andrew's link. And then on the page before that, I added, this is Juan's link. And so I'm going to drop it in the chat as well. And it has a link to his document as well. Okay. You guys see the question there? How do you go about creating a chat bot for students to use? I'll just say that's a whole webinar in itself, but I will let them speak to that as well. I think
it is. I will say,
Mhm.
I don't know how many free ones there are out there that I would feel comfortable utilizing in my classroom. As I said, I was fortunate enough to be able to be in communication with Chat for Schools. They gave me access for a short duration, and my county then, based off of the evidence of what they saw, agreed to pay for my classroom to continue to use it through the rest of the year. They also have They also are currently writing a grant to try to open it up to all middle schools in our county. But I know ours is, Chat for School is subscription based. Now, if you're talking about Notebook LM, utilizing that kind of stuff, there are tons of other ones that are out there that are totally free. Most everybody I know has access to Notebook LM.
Okay. Yep. And Notebook LM is great for teachers, not yet for students. I did drop in the chat. School AI is one that, I mean, we're not allowed to recommend things as DPI, but it's one that is one of the most safe ones that is free to create chatbots for your students. And we have a webinar series on Wednesdays, and I dropped a link there to it. Several of those webinars that Stacy Lovedahl has done involve creating chatbots for student use. And so she walks through that process. And School AI also has great training on its website about how to create chatbots for students.
Yeah, the biggest thing to remember when you're doing the chatbots is to make sure that you go through it yourself afterwards, interact with it as the students would be, so that you see what the chatbot is generating, so that you know what the kids are going to be presented with. Sometimes it takes some tweaking, and that's where it takes some time, prep time. It's not a ton, but it does take a little bit of prep time to train the chatbot to do exactly what you want it to do.
Yeah, that's a prompting skill of its own.
Yes.
And so I did drop the link to those webinars, but it is now 5:29, and I know that you're all ready to go. So I do want to go ahead. Thank you again, Juan and Andrew. I really appreciate y'all hanging out after a very long day and sharing your knowledge and your expertise. But I do want to give Michelle just a minute to close us out and share the feedback form.
We give a special thank you to our presenters, to Vera. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to Juan and to Andrew for sharing their expertise and their insights into actually how they use AI in the classroom with students, real situations, and are making it work. So their contributions this afternoon have really made the session especially meaningful. And so if you do have any questions or any follow-up that you would like to have with them, please reach out to them.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you coming and hope it was helpful to you. Thanks again to Juan and Andrew.